Hello, today is March 10th, 2020. This is the standard SIGS cluster lifecycle call. If you can add your details, your deets to the meeting notes if you're attending. There's not a lot of folks here today, so our agenda might be a little light, we'll see. We'll start with group topics or PSAs. Lubomir, you got a topic?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the group if we want to continue with the plan for the survey, given KubeCon is now delayed to August potentially. Do we still want to release this sequence lifecycle survey in late March?
It's a good question. I think it depends upon PR, because usually these things go along with PR. So if we're doing this in the Kubernetes blog for awareness, that might be beneficial to still get that signal out there. If we're not doing a major PR push, then I would say wait and hold, because usually there's a lot of PR that goes around the events.
Okay, comments by others?
Sounds reasonable.
Yeah, I personally don't think that we're going to get that much PR even at KubeCon. We have to create the PR ourselves. But yeah, we can wait for the survey. I guess I'm fine with that.
I'll have to just get you a cowbell t-shirt, Lubomir.
Yeah. And we have to also think about the questions because we didn't collect that many yet. I also invite COPS and Minikube and the other projects to include questions because we only have Cluster API and KubeIDEA, but for the time being. So if you have any specific questions to the projects, like, hey, is this design that we applied last release is doing work for you or not? Project specifics.
Are there any other questions with regard to the survey?
I get it's not really related to when we're going to release the survey, but I am wondering how we're going to share the results, because from my experience, right, sometimes you answer a survey and then it's sort of like the results, I don't know, sometimes you forget about them or they kind of disappear.
Last time we actually did Lubomir did a presentation to both, the kubeadm survey, we did a presentation both to the kubeadm group as well as the broader SIG cluster lifecycle. I think because this one is more broad, I think presenting to this group the results and the details of the survey for us to be able to take a look at should probably be an ask for post-survey.
I think we also exported the results as an Excel sheet pretty much and shared it with the LTS group. And I'm not sure, maybe some folks missed the results, but this time we're definitely going to announce them more publicly.
And what about sharing with the people who answered the survey? I feel like that, when you complete that loop, then people are more aware of or more willing to answer surveys.
So I'm not sure. I think we had a problem related to that. So whoever completes the survey, it was not possible to send them a notification with the results or something like that. So it was a technical issue, to my knowledge.
Yeah, I think the problem is we'd have to use a third-party service then to get that data back, because there's all kinds of like privacy constraints, especially with GDPR. So last time we just used like Google Sheets, and I think the data was there was no specific data about the individual person submitting. But if we used something like SurveyMonkey to do our surveys, I think we could probably be able to post back, but we should probably coordinate with Contribex to verify. That's a good question.
I'm going to create a PDF with the results and just, send it to all the possible channels, including the Kubernetes dev mailing list. So
I really like that idea, particularly if we actually try to tie work, sorry for jumping in, work we are going to do to it. Like, that will say, like, so the survey showed us this. Survey says Windows is super important, so we're all going to go for Windows or whatever it is, whatever the data tells us to do.
yeah,
It did affect our roadmap last time. We did change our roadmap. It was pretty obvious, but we just prioritized some things higher than others.
yeah, we can also have a comment when we publish the results. We can say, hey, based on the survey, we decided to do this in kubeadm because the public decided it. So
Are there any other questions about surveys? So I think the action item is to follow up with Contribex on maybe some best practices here, because we should anything we do should be probably replicated or verified with Contribex to make sure that we're doing the right thing.
I'm going to join the SIG meeting organized by Contribex on Thursday. I think the topic is going to be issue triage, but if there are topics around surveys, we can also discuss those. But we are going to use our own setup for the survey. We are not going to use SurveyMonkey in this case. Yeah, maybe some of this process, like you were saying, Tim, should be documented somewhere.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Once, twice, 3 times. All right. Are there any more PSAs or broad group topics that folks wanted to discuss before we get into sub-project readouts? Once, twice, 3 times. All right. I think we can just go into sub-project readouts then. Maybe you want to start us off?
Sure. This is just a quick update what we have been working on this cycle in terms of the more interesting items. We basically started working on some tooling to facilitate the move of kubeadm to the new repository, to the existing issue tracker repository that we have. So this is taking a lot of my time currently, but I already have some good progress in terms of automating, tagging, branching, and basically maintaining the same version as Kubernetes. And also I have to update the cap and notify SIG release for another review on this cap. The other item is that we are working on Windows support, and it's hopefully going to graduate a bit this cycle. In fact, the chances are pretty high at this point. The docs are ready to merge, and also we are pretty much already testing our end-to-end test setup for Windows and kubeadm with deploying Windows/Linux cluster using kubeadm. And I wanted to notify especially the cluster API folks that we had a look at the existing setups for GCP and AWS. And Ben Moss from ex-Pivotal, who now works for VMware, expressed that he can do much simpler if he writes a simple bash script that deploys on GCP. So we went with that solution. So we basically wrote our own infrastructure deployer pretty much, which is surprisingly only something like 200 lines of bash compared to what we have in some of the copy providers, which is much larger than that. So maybe in the future we can transition this end-to-end test setup to cluster API, but for now we decided that we simply don't have the time to go this route, so we decided to write our own thing pretty much. Okay, so any questions for kubeadm?
All right. Next up, Justin.
Yeah, a non-update update from COPS, which is that we're basically just catching up. We did a couple of releases. I think we released 1.16.0, our first 1.16 formal release in the in this sprint, but otherwise not really much of cross-project interest to report.
Any questions for Justin? Going once, twice, 3 times. Lee, you have the next two.
Hi, yeah. So for the add-ons project, we submitted for the Google Summer of Code, and several students have picked up on that and are quite excited about it. But we are lacking immediate, well-triaged work that they are asking for. So we were a bit unexpected and unprepared for that because it's normally a summer timeline. So just trying to get those folks connected up since they're asking for it. And then we have a planned discussion for using add-on installer configuration potentially in COPS, since Justin and folks have already put together a POC of how to get the add-on operators up and running and how what the UX is starting to look like there. After chatting last week, following the cluster API call, we do have a desire to propose that the add-on installer configuration is used for the newly designed cluster API apply operator for post-cluster creation, just to encourage a unified kind of approach to describing how things are bundled and applied. And that can be an add-on or appended kind of feature set to what's already there. And then this morning for component standard, we did a project management review. We've been lacking PM help. And so even just figuring out where things were was very helpful. Appreciate everyone joining and discussing through things. We also held a design discussion on 2 topics. One was Obitech's work on YAML v3 versus v2 performance and a collection of documents separated to blobs. And then there was the YAML thing, and then there was also quite long discussion of component config with instance-specific stuff and design issues and kubeadm. And we'll post the recording. But basically, up and coming, perhaps in the next release, are some UX changes for component config consumers, just to change the way that we're kind of using stuff. And, so go ahead and check the notes there if you want to be up to date with where work is moving for component standard. Any questions with regard to add-on or component standard work?
I do have a question, maybe an ask. So there's there's work both in kubeadm as well as in cluster API that I think for a long time in kubeadm land, and a short recent bout of angst in recent release of cluster API with regards to doing their own add-on management because of upgrade scenarios. I think it might be beneficial to this group to maybe go through a state of the state of where add-ons is at and where you need help and what the vision is for the next release, because I think we've gotten to the point now where we have enough angst to actually drive execution. That's always a useful thing. Sometimes that's enough to get the ball rolling. We've seen this on the horizon for a long time, but I think the frustration has reached a pinnacle. So would it make sense to maybe next meeting set like a presentation expectation to walk through where add-ons is at, what work items are currently in flux, and like where you'd like to see it go?
Yeah, I can work with speaking with the add-ons folks. It might be better to do, because our meeting is not until next week. And it's actually after it's after our SIG call. I don't want to push it that far out. So yeah, I can just do next week. I can try to speak fairly for the group.
Well, I mean, next time during the SIG cluster lifecycle call, so that's 2 weeks from today.
So. Oh, 2 weeks from today.
Yep.
Oh yeah, so we'll have a meeting already. So I'll bring it up with everyone. We can put together a presentation.
Right, I think that'd be great. Yeah, that way we can actually try to see, because I guarantee you we'll probably have more people in the next cycle to try and address some of the backlog items and start to burn down some of those things. So as we start to pay down the debt, both in kubeadm and in cluster API, we can try to maybe unite the ideas together. So
yeah, that would be excellent.
All right. Any other questions with regards to add-ons or component standard?
I have a quick question related to Google Summer of Code. Lee, did you actually assign mentors for individual students? Because to my understanding, like I've been a mentor 2 times, almost 10 years ago. Each student required an individual mentor. Did you manage to, like, did you have the capacity for this?
So we had a large number of people who were emphatic about being mentors in different areas of the add-on project, including me, Justin, and some core DNS maintainers, and Jeff. And so we were planning to just be multiple mentors with a lead for one student. It wasn't clear to us that like what the selection process was like, and if this was going to be a many-to-one or many-to-many situation for the mentor to students ratio. And the selection process has not begun for Summer of Code, right? But these folks have identified themselves and followed all of our community channels to get to the right place to where they want to do contribution, trying to probably get ahead of the ball. Yeah, so that's these folks now see that the project is listed. They're interested. We don't have the level of project management maturity and design yet, to have extremely approachable work. Like the stuff that's tackled in the project is still, a little bit advanced.
Yeah, my recommendation there is going to be to always ask, like, quote unquote, probe the candidates, the students, in terms of what is their existing knowledge. If, for instance, if somebody is already an expert in networking, you can try assigning him to something related to a Q-proxy add-on or something like that. I don't know. Basically, you have to try to understand what they know already, the students, because otherwise, you might be throwing resources at tasks that people are not going to complete. What is the deadline for the GCS, GCOS, or C, by the way?
Yeah, GSOC. It was something like May was when folks were supposed to identify a mentor and have things formalized, and then going into the summer would be the work period for which those folks would be formally mentored and compensated.
I see. So there is enough time still for the assigning mentors to students.
Yes, yeah. It's the timeline was rather generous when we decided to, even though it was kind of a last minute application from the admin side of things. There's still a lot of time to that, but as soon as everything got published, we now have folks who are joining calls, asking to meet people, asking for work. So
yeah,
and we just weren't prepared for that influx of folks.
Hopefully, you guys can provide a good representation of the Kubernetes project.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully, students are going to come back to us next year. Yeah, that's I just wanted to get some more details because I haven't been following this.
Yeah, thanks for your recommendation. Smart.
No problem. Thanks.
Are there any other questions with regards to add-on and component standard? Going once, twice, 3 times. Right. Next up, Daniel, CDADM.
Just a couple minor updates. There's a cert renewal command PR that's going to merge soon. I don't know if anybody wants to take a look. I think last time we met, I mentioned that there were some unknowns around Kube API server needing to be restarted once once the certs on disks were changed. So I don't know if anybody has any ideas, anything they want to share about that on the PR, that would be helpful. It's not a blocker for the PR, so that should merge soon. And the other, I think something that would be nice to have happen in the short term would be binary artifacts for the GitHub releases. If anybody can help, or if there's something very simple that that I could do to make that happen. I mean, I clearly I could just manually add the artifacts, but if there's something sort of more clever, I'd love to get some help on that. And yeah, that's all the updates for now.
Daniel, that's something I can definitely work with you on. I do that because this is a binary artifact, right? Not an image.
Yeah.
Which I have some experience with because of COPS, which has the same use case. And I'm trying to get that onto the official working group Gates Infra stuff.
There was also a comment in the channel with regards to Go Releaser. So if folks have comments, I think maybe asking the question in cluster lifecycle, because it seems like there's a couple of folks who could weigh in there too. Have a conversation there. Any other comments with regards to CDAM? Next up, I put it down there because it's a big day for Cluster API, but no one put an update in there. So, I mean, Jason, do you want to take this?
Yeah, I can go ahead and take this. I think the biggest news that we have to share is that we're basically running towards the V1 Alpha 3 release for not just Cluster API, but quite a few of the providers as well. So I think that's why we don't have a lot of the other core Cluster API folks here today. I know Vince in particular is working towards getting us there. So we're looking to cut the initial V1 Alpha 3 release of core Cluster API version 0.3.0 later today, as long as we don't hit any blockers between now and then. I would also expect to see V1 Alpha 3 oriented releases for the AWS provider, the vSphere provider, and probably the Azure provider within the next few days as well. I know at least for the AWS provider, we're really close to a release. I think we only have 1 or 2 more potential blocking issues. So after core cluster API is out, we should be able to cut the release probably early tomorrow, the way that it's trending right now for the cluster API release.
Any other questions for Jason? I just want to take a short second to shout out to getting V1 Alpha 3 out the door. That's probably the biggest step forward, I think, in the history of Cluster API. It's for realsies now, I think, right? Before it's kind of like, you could integrate with it, you could use it. I think now it's like, it's ready. I think the adoption curve is going to go tick but we need to do all the PR and everything else that goes around it. But it's super awesome to see, and it's pretty exciting to see it all coming together. So congrats.
Yeah, totally. Also, just with regard to it, I got my hands on the newer API and got really excited about it. And then Duffy, shout out to Duffy for doing an awesome TGIK on Friday on Cluster API Provider Docker. And if you folks haven't seen it, that just happened last week, and it's great. So.
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of use cases and user scenarios that are out there. And I think, getting the adoption curve, rolling the adoption curve now and focusing on stabilization will probably be super useful for maybe the next cycle or so. And it's just great to see. Like, it started out, like, was it 2 years ago? Started out as like as a single small thing 2 years ago as an idea. And now it's like, it's ready. I think it's ready for prime time. So it's exciting.
Yep, it's definitely been a fun adventure, and seeing where it is today versus where it was when I started working with it is almost night and day.
Yeah. Any other questions for Cluster API? Going once, twice, 3 times. All right, Minikube, Sharif.
Yeah, we released 1.8 on Friday, actually 1.8.1, and the highlights there are just our Docker driver is a lot more stable, and we now have from a cold start we can start Kubernetes and your VM in about 50 seconds. So we're under a minute finally on a cold startup, as long as your cache is warm. So that's the highlights.
That's really cool. Which VM driver is that with?
The Docker driver is almost under 40 seconds now, and for HyperKit and for KVM, we're under 60 seconds. Windows is still a disaster.
Very cool.
Any other questions? I only have one question. Can you do multi-clustering yet?
Multi-cluster is going to be coming this month.
Oh, sweet. That'd be awesome. Any other questions?
So it's also on the roadmap for once you have multi-cluster, then you'll be implementing the Minikube cluster API provider for that.
It's on the roadmap, yeah.
Yeah.
That would be exciting. That would be super exciting, actually. Yep. For development, that's pretty swanky. Any other questions? Going once, twice, 3 times. All right. Are there any other updates or group topics that folks want to discuss? Otherwise, we can get 29 minutes back or 28 minutes back. Last call. Going once, I'll count really slow. Because some people always interrupt me at 2. Going twice. 3 times. All right. Well, that's it. Take care, everybody. Stay safe. Hope no one gets coronavirus. And if you're traveling, stay safe. So take care.
Bye, everyone.